Hello and welcome to Ask Richland, an ongoing program where you, the viewer, get a chance to ask your city staff questions about your city. Each program we try to pick a specific topic and then focus on that topic and take your questions. So tonight's program is all about traffic safety and street safety. So joining us on the program are Julie West, who is our Transportation and Development Manager, also basically the city engineer, and Police Officer Doug Doss, and we're going to take your questions here on Ask Richland. So, since we are live on Facebook, it's very, very simple. All you have to do is just go ahead and put your question in the comment section there on Facebook. Now, please keep it very short and to the point, and remember, we are just fielding questions about traffic and street safety. If you have other questions that you want answered on future programs or would like an answer, the best thing to do is go to our email and email askrichland@ci.richland.wa.us. So tonight, all about traffic safety here on Ask Richland. So let's just go ahead and get started. We have received a few emails and other questions ahead of time, so we're going to ask those first. The biggest one, and this is directed to you, Doug, which is we're talking about speed limits. Concerned about, throughout neighborhoods, towns, and all that. What can we do to look at our speed limits and maybe focus on lowering them or even raise them in some areas?
Sure. The city, how the city is growing, and from commercial to residential to even our commuter traffic, speed is a very large concern throughout the citywide. And so what we do, besides enforcement of speed, we also, what we like to use are the 3 E's: enforcement, education, and engineering. So besides enforcement and our own observations, as well as complaints that we receive from the community, we also use engineering, and we work very closely with our traffic engineers, and we also have some tools that we use to collect data that we can pass on to them as well. Also data that will support us and what we're looking at in whatever complaint that can come in. If that's something that we can verify and confirm, if that's something we need to spend a little bit more time on. So we do have some options out there. We know it's always a concern. And so we're doing the best that we can with the resources we have. We know that it's always a hot topic in any community.
Well, now I know in this particular question they were talking about Welshon Way, and so you were, before we got on camera, you were telling me about some of the different things that have happened on Welshon Way to dictate the speeding there. Explain that to me.
Yeah, so a lot of folks may see a little less speed enforcement going on in Welshon Way. Welshon Way is a 35-mile-an-hour zone. We have a lot of commercial through there. 2 revisions that we've had in the last year or two is, one, we've had the light, so a controlled intersection put in, as well as some cut-through roads with Stevens and Dupertail. So having a controlled intersection in that area has reduced speeding quite a bit. Because of that controlled intersection, we've made the decision to remove the crosswalk for school zones. So the students are expected to cross at the controlled intersections.
Right.
And so because of that removal and with the additional lights there at Stevens and Dupertail and Welshon now, you'll probably see a reduction in as far as traffic enforcement's going. Not to say that we're not out there, not to say you won't see us, because we use Welshon Way quite a bit, but you'll definitely see a little bit smaller volume of police as far as working traffic control, especially for the school zone that we had there for a long, long time.
It has become less of a cut-through street, hasn't it? So let's continue to move on. Oh, we already have a question, so let's just go ahead and go to the first question up there. And it looks like this one will be addressed to Doug. And what is the minimum age for a child to sit in the front seat?
They say 4'9". They go by measurements. 4'9". You're allowed to go ahead and sit in the front seat. And there's some caveats to this. Say if you have a truck with just a bench seat in it, obviously they can use the front seat with the required restraints in there. But usually it's about 4'9". They go by the measurement and the weight and the height, and roughly around 12 to 14 they should be okay, even 16 sometimes. But I would err on the side of caution and go with 16, but be very careful on making sure you meet that minimum standard.
So what is, I mean, the bottom line, the reason why keep the kids in the back seat?
A lot of it has to do with it's just safer in the back seat by and large for those front end collisions. Also with the advent of airbags. If you've ever had an airbag deploy in your face, it's like getting punched in the face. A lot of times people will suffer concussions with that. Well, if you have a child in the front seat that takes an airbag to the face or to the side of the head, you're looking at some potential major damage going on. And so it's just much safer to keep them in the back seat.
Yeah, good. Okay, Julie, I'm going to move on to this. This is a question they're talking about Terminal Drive and Van Giesen. And, during peak hours at that intersection, it's kind of dangerous. Traffic is kind of jutting in and out and things of that nature. For those of you who don't know, also explain to me where this is. But what is the city doing and looking at maybe trying to improve traffic safety in that area?
So in that area, Terminal Drive is just to the west of the railroad crossing there where it tees in with SR 240. And we've heard similar complaints coming through into Public Works as well. And at that intersection and the Van Giesen intersection with 240, that's actually a state route. And we've had communications with WashDOT. We've shared our concerns with them. And there are discussions going on about safety through that corridor as well as the 240 corridor, actually at all of the intersections right now. So they are evaluating, and Doug made a really good comment earlier about the fact that there are other routes that you could use to try and get out of the Terminal Drive area, going down to Buckskin Loop as well as the Airport Way onto 240. And so during those peak times, it would be good for motorists to try and avoid that area as much as they can and use those alternate routes.
And Doug, did you want to elaborate on that a little?
Whenever you can avoid making a left-hand turn from a stop sign, do it. So if you can go to a controlled intersection, I would take the extra 3 minutes and go to a controlled intersection.
Plus, you'll probably get out faster doing it that way than sitting at the stop sign when you get into traffic.
Yes.
Okay. Another question we have, and this is talking about students jaywalking. Couldn't schools monitor this more, and what can be done about jaywalking?
Well, we recently had a complaint come in from a citizen concerned about jaywalking, especially from students from Richland High School. And so what we've done in the past is we've done some research base into that area, not only with enforcement and education, but also through our city attorney's office, our attorney that looks at misdemeanors and traffic violations and things of that nature. And this is an area that has a lot of people concerned because students for lunch will cross the street and go to the gas station, or used to be Albertsons or maybe Subway, Baskin Robbins, or wherever you may think, to get a nice nutritious lunch, and will go right out in the middle of the street. So we've recently teamed up again with our school resource officer, Officer Crouch, and he's working with the school to once again publish these concerns and what the law is and what the expectations are. And then we will be providing extra education enforcement in that area as well. So much like, sometimes I feel like a firefighter. We have these little fires come up and we put them out. And this is one that does come up every once in a while. And, pedestrian safety, especially when it comes to students and kids, is as high as you can get on our list of priorities.
And this next question kind of goes along the lines because we're talking about walkability of the city, bike routes and things of that nature. So the person, their question is basically wanting to know what the city's plans are for designing more bike lanes, and what are we doing to make this downtown area more desirable for the walkability factor.
Well, in engineering, we take an opportunity whenever a new project's coming forth to evaluate what we're trying to accomplish and accommodating the bike lanes as well as the pedestrian features. And you'll see that in several of our downtown projects that we just did this last year with the bike lanes were added along Jadwin, as well as the work that we're doing along Swift. All of the corridor projects that we've done over the recent years have also included bike lanes, with the Stevens extension from Lee connecting up to Welsden, as well as Dupertail all the way through the corridor up to 240. And so we're continually looking to incorporating those features into our projects, as well as we have a complete streets policy that encourages us to incorporate those multimodal features.
So just explain a little bit about this complete streets, because it's part of city code, basically. It goes in there. So tell me what that means.
So what it means is that that our goal is to design features to accommodate pedestrians and bicyclists and other modes of travel, and incorporate those features into our roadway projects when we're doing surfacing projects or doing any kind of capital improvement project where we're widening. So we're continuously looking at adding those features and have been very successful at doing so.
Very good. So it looks like we have another question, and this is one we actually have earlier emails about, which deals with people parking on the sidewalk. And this person talks about the crosswalks at my son's school. People block the crosswalks. I'm assuming they're talking about parking on the sidewalk. It could be something else, but let's touch on both. What can be done about that?
We do get complaints about some folks parking on the sidewalk, more often than not than parking in crosswalks. Both are violations. Both can be cited with a monetary fine. We also will have our volunteers, our VIPs, go out, and they love to issue either parking infractions or legal notice warnings to help once again reinforce that some of our streets, especially in interior Richland, are not designed to have parking on either side. They just weren't designed that way back in the day, and so we need to be aware of that. So again, both are violations. Both can have basically receive a parking ticket on, very similar to parking in front of a hydrant. And if it's something that's an abandoned vehicle, then we address that a little bit differently. So when we do get those complaints, we go in and we address those complaints. And again, we have volunteers and other patrol officers and myself and Officer Edwards with the traffic unit that will go out and identify some of these areas and take a proactive measure.
And it's a real safety issue, especially when you're talking areas where you only have one side of the street to walk on, and they have to jut out in the traffic to go around to cars. So
yeah.
Okay, let's. We have another question, but let's do this one first, because this is another 2 or 3 emails that we've received, and this is talking about, well, a little bit of everything, the Queensgate area, and this is actually talking about the intersection of Keene. And so there's been an uptick in crashes, it seems like, especially since we've redone that road. So the city started looking at that, trying to reevaluate it. What have we done to try to improve that area?
So the design improvements that took place with that project were adding the right turn designated lane on Keene if you're heading westbound, as well as widening Keene to accommodate 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, and the 2 roundabouts were installed. And the concern that we've heard recently is the signalized intersection at Queen and Queensgate. And so what we've implemented there that's different, that I think motorists are struggling a little bit with, is we've implemented the flashing left turn arrow. And that's different for our community. It's not different for our area, but in Richland, that is the first one that we've implemented. And so I think travelers are a little bit caught off guard trying to figure out what it means and how they're supposed to react to it, as well as at that intersection before they had a controlled stop situation where they would always have the green arrow to allow them to turn, and now it's a flashing yellow and there's a decision to be made. And so we have seen an uptick in collisions at that location. We are evaluating it as the traffic's flowing through. There have been signal timing changes that have been made periodically as we're watching how motorists are reacting to it. And that's mainly the biggest concern that we've heard at that location.
So the flashing yellow is pretty much just mean, turn but proceed with caution, allow the other traffic to come through
Correct.
first.
Yeah, it's a yield condition now where they don't have the
right
right of way, and so trying to judge the speed of the cars coming and where the gap allows them to actually make that left turn safely.
Staying in that area, there's been some concern, on the roundabouts about using the crosswalks properly and all that. Doug, what are the rules for using the crosswalks as far as for pedestrians?
Well, use a marked crosswalk, that's first. And you want to yield to traffic before you step foot in the middle of the street, even when there's a marked crosswalk. Common sense prevails, and in instances like these. In this particular area of Queensgate, they're installing lights, which adds more attention and more focus for some of our drivers to know and recognize that there's someone crossing the road. But even in the middle of the day, some of our community public has a hard time seeing folks that want to cross the street. And so it just takes a little bit more of a concerted effort by all of us, actually, and to recognize that pedestrians, when they start crossing the street, they have the right of way, and you don't want to proceed through until they're about a lane and a half away from you. And so it takes a little bit more attention for us to pay attention to the crosswalks. But the last thing we ever want to do is strike somebody in a crosswalk. That's heartbreaking.
So the rules for crosswalk use is the drivers must yield once they've entered the crosswalk?
Well, ideally before.
Right.
Ideally before. So they recognize that pedestrians preparing to cross in a marked crosswalk, and they should be stopping depending upon where their lane of travel is. But ideally, all the lanes of travel should start stopping and slowing down and recognizing that.
So staying on roundabouts, what is the proper way to drive through one of those things?
Well, as you're coming into a roundabout, there's some design features to it that help slow you down. So that's the first thing, is slow your speed as you're getting closer to the roundabout. You'll want to pay attention to the signing that's several hundred feet before you get to it. There's some lane designation signing that'll tell you which lane you want to be in. And a really good rule to follow is, if you're in a 2-lane roundabout, if you want to go left, be in the left lane. And if you want to go right, be in the right lane. And typically both lanes will go through. But if you pick your lane before you actually get to the roundabout, that helps with the confusion of it. As well as when you get to the roundabout, you want to yield to the pedestrians in the crosswalks. You also want to yield to the vehicles that are already in the roundabout. They do have the right of way. And space your gap and figure out how to fit in to be able to keep the fluid movement going and be alert.
And of course, slow down.
And slow down, yes.
Okay. Another question we have, which is, they even said it's for you, Julie. So why did the city remove access from Lee at the Parkway to Howard Amon Park?
Gosh, that actually, I remember when that happened. That was probably over a decade ago. That took place when the improvements were being made to the Parkway corridor through there. And I believe that it was removed in order to create that uptown feel, or the downtown feel there, and to provide business continuity and such through the corridor. And it did take a little bit to get used to. I remember when it took place. And there are 2 routes around the Parkway area, and so it's just a matter of taking a left or a right when you get to that location. And going around. But my understanding is it was to develop the Parkway area. That's why they implemented that.
And so far it's been pretty effective then?
It has, yeah.
Okay. So again, we'd like to let you know that we encourage you to ask the questions here on Ask Richland, and we are talking about traffic, street safety. Again, if you have any other questions that don't pertain to these topics, we can save those for other programs. If you want immediate responses to those, feel free to email us at askrichland@ci.richland.wa.us, and we'll be happy to get those questions answered to you. Another question, this is talking about U-turns. So are U-turns at intersections legal in Richland or Washington State for that matter?
They are, unless they're specifically designated by signage that they're not. The other part about U-turns is you can't initiate a U-turn unless it's safe to do so. So if it looks like you're going to be holding traffic up to execute your U-turn, that's illegal. If you try to make a U-turn where there's signage that says U-turns are prohibited, that's legal. Otherwise, they're legal. Again, common sense and safe driving practices really pay off in this. We see a lot of U-turns made coming into town on George Washington Way at Columbia Point, when they're trying to make a left on the Aaron. Right. And sometimes you'll see that car in the left-hand turn and decide to make a U-turn. Perfectly legal as long as it's safe to do so and they don't hold up traffic, oncoming traffic or other traffic that has a right-of-way.
Good. Well, Doug, I guess I think it's been a year. The distracted driving law has been in effect for roughly a year now. So, how's it been working? What's RPD's take on this?
I'm excited to see what the stats are going to bring from the state, and we'll hopefully get next year's stats here soon. That's kind of how it works in government. You get last year's stats this year, and where last year it's been around for about a year and a half now. What we know is that we had great data pointing to the fact that we needed to have clarification on especially cell phone use, and then they enacted basically that Part B with dangerously distracted with this new law. We know that distracted driving causes collisions. They're main contributors in collisions and fatalities. We know that folks, for instance, who are on cell phones, and it still happens, they show signs almost like folks that are impaired driving, weaving in and out of lanes and not paying attention to what's going on, to the main mission of operating their car. So I'm excited to see what the data is going to bring, what that raw data is going to bring from the state, hopefully this coming year, relatively soon. The other thing that we've been able to do through our Target Zero Traffic Safety Task Force in the area is we've been able to secure a grant that helps with crosswalk or distracted driving intersection enforcement. So we helped the Kennewick Police Department in November do that, where we would call out violations and that we're seeing in plain clothes, and officers would go and contact some of those drivers. So we have funds to do something like that in Richland when we identify an area or two that will be very beneficial to once again remind folks to stay off their phones. So we're seeing we're seeing a lot of positive outcomes from this new law, and it's a great law. It had to happen.
It is, because you see this all the time driving down the road.
Some folks will Facebook Live while they drive down the road, believe it or not. True story.
We are not driving right now at this Facebook Live. Let everybody know that. We're actually seated and our cell phones are down. So, another question. Is there any chance of a right turn lane, or is there, well, let me say that. Is there any chance of a right turn lane onto Highway 240 from Aaron Drive? Okay, so they're looking for a right turn lane.
Yes, that would be great to have. And actually, we're hoping for bigger plans actually at that intersection. And we've just recently come out with a request for qualifications for a consulting team that's going to evaluate that intersection and possibly looking at some grade separations as well as intersection improvements that could happen at that location. And generally the 240 corridor as a whole. And improvements could be made along the corridor. So,
well, definitely when the Dupertail Bridge finally opens up, it's going to help alleviate a lot of that.
Yes, the traffic flow will change,
right,
significantly.
We talked earlier about speeding in neighborhoods, but one of the biggest concerns is obviously speeding through school zones. Yeah. So what's RP doing to address these concerns of people, especially the biggest concern seems to be along George Washington Way, through the, was that Jefferson? Yeah, through
Jefferson Elementary.
Yeah. What are we doing to address this?
As much time as we can dedicate, we will patrol school zones. And we have, 12 to 16 different schools in Richland, between high schools and middle schools and elementaries. And we do get complaints, a lot of complaints for the George Washington Way, Van Giesen, school zone. It's kind of a tricky area to work sometimes from a police officer perspective. We have some great signage up there, but the expectation is that our students cross at controlled intersections. And so we have marked crossing guards through the school district, which do a fantastic job. They're volunteers, and they are dedicated. They work, they're out there in the cold and they're out there in the sun and the heat, and they help get our students off to school safely. So school zone safety is a priority for the Richland Police Department. And I'll say this is the traffic safety unit, we dedicate one shift out of the 4 that we work a week to try to come in and work our school zone, especially in the morning, which is a higher, it seems to be where more traffic is coming in and out, obviously. But really the unsung heroes in this are patrol officers who are out there, and they will also contribute to that. And besides of all the other duties that they have assigned, they'll go and they'll work school zones and help educate and enforce and help us out in that respect. So we know that that's an area that we have a lot of complaints on, a lot of, I should say, concerns, not complaints, concerns. And we just encourage, the first thing is have our students cross at controlled intersections, which they do. And the other part is we're out there as often as time permits to help with that education and enforcement aspect as well.
Okay. Well, we only have a few more minutes left, so again, if you have a question about traffic safety, street safety, now's the time to write that down there, and we will be sure and answer it. You know, earlier we talked about distracted driving. Well, there's also, you know, under the influence driving. Mm-hmm. And so very curious about what has RPD noticed through DUIs, especially now with the new marijuana laws?
That they're out there. They're out there, and they're more dangerous than ever. Officers are being trained to look for signs and symptoms of impairment that go beyond alcohol. And so we always think of DUI associated with alcohol. There's also marijuana involved, and there's prescription drugs, and sometimes there's polyuse. So we have alcohol with the combination of prescription drugs and maybe marijuana. And unfortunately, we've had major collisions involving marijuana. We've had fatalities involving marijuana, even in our community. It's a problem. It's a big problem. And so understand that buzz driving kills, whether that's alcohol, whether that's prescription medication, whether that's marijuana. And so the statistics are there, and unfortunately, they're rising. Yeah.
Okay. Julie, there's a term called traffic calming. It refers to speed bumps, like our little flashing lights we have at crosswalks, things like that. So there's a common occurrence in a lot of neighborhoods, you know, to have these kind of things. How does a neighborhood go about, you know, first off, finding out if they're, you know, we need traffic calm in their area, and secondly, how do we get that?
So we tend to get a lot of requests for traffic calming in neighborhoods, and so the best approach is to, you know, gather information from your neighbors and such on the concerns, bring that forth to the city, and the traffic engineer in partnership with the police department will evaluate the speeds of the roadway and if there's anything that can be done to help try and reduce either the traffic volumes or the speeding, the conditions that the travelers are going through as they're going down those neighborhood roads.
And then basically it becomes a funded issue that if we find it's an issue.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And a lot of the, I think a lot of the actual speed radar signs are typically homeowners association owned and maintained. The city isn't installing those. Those are ones that a homeowner association group will come together to have those installed to help try and identify that there's a speeding issue on their street.
But those have to be approved. They can't just run out and install.
Nope. No, that's why they need to bring it forth to the Public Works Department and for evaluation, yes.
You talked about the radar, you know, the radar trailer. What's the purpose of that, and how do we use it?
Our radar trailer, it serves several different purposes. First, the visual deterrent aspect. And I've been one where I'm cruising down the road and I see a radar trailer and evaluate my own speed. You know, make sure my speed is what it is. It's accurate in my car, but also a rough estimate of how fast I'm going. So it's a visual deterrent, you know, plain and simple. Also, it helps bring awareness of that there's a speed problem in this area. And we do have collection data built in one of the trailers where it will collect data, speed data, time and volume data that we then download and we can share with our traffic engineers. But we've also coupled with our traffic engineers too to buy some additional equipment that assesses potential speed problems that are not as identifiable as speed radar trailers. And so those have been invaluable to be able to assess how if this particular location that's been reported is an actual problem or just a hypersensitive neighbor or two. And in that way we can dedicate resources to that area as well and then report back.
Okay, good. Another question we have, and that is, how are school zones determined? Some zones are just a block while others are 2 to 3. Who might want to address this?
Gosh, I don't know if I know a concise answer to that. I believe it would be based on the zone, the geographical area that contributes to that school, and the school walk routes that are coming into the area. Do you have?
But is the city establishes a school zone, or it's a school district?
It's a school district,
Yeah.
actually, that establishes a school zone. The city has recommendations on them, and we work closely with them on it, but it's actually the school district that sets those school areas, those zone areas, the crossing areas.
And that's similar with the crosswalks, school crosswalks too. That's through the school district, isn't it?
Yes, they'll help identify that and then work with our traffic engineers to make that happen and identify. Julie hit it right on the head as far as the travel patterns and walk routes and certain distances from the school and what's considered to be a major thoroughfare for that school and versus a side street, say. So.
Okay.
And we do try and condense it down to as short a zone as possible, because then it has the kids crossing at a common location. So that's definitely an educational piece for parents, is to make sure that the kids are crossing in those zone areas.
Yeah.
Okay, well this is actually a pretty interesting one, but yeah, I've actually thought of this before. Is it legal to leave my kids ages 10 and 8 in a car while I go shopping?
I wouldn't.
Come on,
personally.
tell us, Doug.
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't either.
Weather conditions and things like that. No, you're looking at well beyond traffic issues on something like that, neglect and other things. Now, are you running into Little Caesars to pick up a hot and ready, or you leaving them in there while you go to the mall shopping? There's a lot of different contributing factors in that.
And let's not even start about leaving pets in the car, right?
No. No.
So we talk about traffic safety, we talk about street safety, but there's another topic that falls along that lines. And before we end the program today, I'd like to talk a little bit about that, which is vehicle prowls. Richland unfortunately has issues with vehicle prowls. Why is that, and what can be done to prevent it?
Lock your car. Lock your car. Lock it or lose it. I remember doing a video not too long ago for you on that. We are like any bedroom community that is growing, and we have different generational population and citizens out there, and sometimes we fall victim to our own wishful thinking that it's okay to leave our cars unlocked in Richland. It is not okay. If you don't want anything to go missing, lock your car. And as a matter of fact, just lock your car anyways. That is the number one contributing factor, is that it's a crime of opportunity. And there are folks that will just go down a line of cars and see if it's unlocked. And if it's unlocked, they're getting in. And they're going to take whatever they can take before they boogie on out. And so please lock your cars. That would reduce these crimes of opportunity so dramatically. And we try to message that out every year and communicate that. And sometimes we get a really good connection with it, and sometimes we don't. And so just lock your car, keep your valuable items out of the general view of the public. In fact, take them with you.
And then, of course, there's the other part of that message, which we've addressed in the past too, which is the remove part of it.
Yeah.
And then if you are a victim, report it. And why is that so important?
Report it. So that way we can have some kind of documentation. a baseline of understanding if this is a trend in a neighborhood that happened, say, the night before, if we're going to be expecting other victims, and then also if we happen to catch the suspect in this, or suspects, because oftentimes they work together, and that way we can identify property and get it returned and have good charges on these folks that need to be charged. Property crime and especially car prowls are prevalent in the Tri-Cities. It's not just Richland, it is Tri-City wide. And we are growing. We are a growing community, and that's a good thing. But we also need to protect ourselves as well. Lock those or take the valuables with you and lock your cars just like you would your house.
Very good. So one last question for each of you, and it's basically the same question but from a different perspective. So we'll start with you, Julie. You know, how safe is Richland's transportation system, and where are we going in the next few years to improve that safety?
I would say overall, I think Richland is a very safe transportation network. We're always striving to improve it and do better, and we have lots of projects coming up over the coming years to improve safety. We have several of the rapid flash beacons at the different crosswalks. We have 2 along George Washington Way that we're doing. We have 1 on Welshon that we're doing as well there at Lawless. We have another one going up on Dupertail up between the Walmart shopping district area to help with crossing there between the bus stops. And so we're continually striving to do better, and we apply for grants continuously. We actually were very fortunate this year to have been awarded a very large state safety grant. And so we're implementing some projects through that funding with a roundabout at Thayer and Van Giesen, which actually help with the school crossings as well. So we're installing that here in the next 2 years, as well as some traffic signal upgrades, and so you'll see more of the flashing yellow. An educational program that'll be coming out for that as well as reflective backplating on our signals so that the heads stand out more, especially in the dusk hours and during the evening. So we're continually improving our system, improving the safety of it. And so, yeah, I feel that it's a very safe community to be in and to drive in.
Okay, and then to you, Doug, how safe are the Richland streets?
Safe. They're safe. And what our community, I hope they understand from this, is that we are working very hard to always improve that. With our growth, which again is a good thing, comes additional problems, just like any community. And the Richland Police Department and the Traffic Safety Unit and the patrol officers and our volunteers are working as hard as they can to educate and enforce when we have to enforce, and also work with our engineering. Our unsung heroes for the city, for this community, is our traffic engineers and our streets department, our volunteers and our patrol unit that are out there all the time, whenever they're needed, 24/7, some of them, helping making this community safe. We know that driving and traffic complaints and concerns are always 1 or 2 in our surveys, yearly annual surveys, and we are dedicating resources to that with the resources that we have, and allocating resources to help curb some of these issues. And again, partnering with our traffic engineers is incredible, because they're doing an incredible job with this. So we hear you loud and clear, and we're working on solving this equation for you. So.
All right, and that's a very good place to end this program. We want to thank you for asking us questions here on Ask Richland, and be sure and tune in for future programs as we explore other issues here in the city of Richland. Let me quickly thank my guests, Julie West and Doug Doss, for being on the program. We thank you for the questions. I'm Michael Sharp, and we'll see you next time on Ask Richland.
You're watching City View TV, your Richland community connection.
The Richland Public Library is proud to call itself a third space, different from home, work, or school, complementing its patrons' need for education, socialization, and entertainment.
The library is a third space because it's a space that's not your home, although you're always welcome here. It's not your office, but we encourage you to come here and study. Libraries are very much a communal space. They are an anchor in the community, a place where people come to meet others, and a place where they can be alone, but in the midst of others, and not in a place of consumption like a shopping place.
It may be the need for information that brings the patrons in, but it's the depth of the programming and activities that keep them coming back.
We are very fortunate in that we have wonderful librarians, and we've been able to specialize as of 2 years ago. So we have a teen librarian, we know we have a wonderful children's librarian, and we have an adult librarian. Why? We do very well when it comes to children's programming, but we have areas of growth when it comes to teens and adults both. Teens need places to go, they need places to be and to be with others. Adult programming also key and very important. We have things like the Memory Cafe where caregivers can get out of the confines of their homes and come here. We have movie days where people can come and watch films, and these are adult geared. In addition, so they supplement, they extend what we have for our children's programming.
The most recent addition to the library's offering is a highly popular STEAM space, which completed construction in August of 2017. This soundproof area was built with funding from the Library Foundation and Friends of the Library. It is the dedicated space for those that want to do.
STEAM is important because it allows people to do things they wouldn't ordinarily do, and the emphasis today in libraries is on doing. For instance, we had a patron who uses the library quite often who has use of only 3 fingers. She was able to come in and is wheelchair bound. She was able to come in and go under seas, and she told us this was the first time she'd ever not felt the weight of her wheelchair. And that's a part of the function of our virtual reality and our STEAM space, which has resources like 3D printers, multiple ones, and we've even had nursing students use those to help them generate different body parts in 3D perspectives. We have robotics such as Ozobots, kids and adults alike. Those are, I think, our most popular toys, if you will. And so people are coming here and the value is clear, and we're very proud to look out in the parking lot and see not one space empty.
And that is why the Richland Public Library is happy to claim its relevancy of being a third space for all.
The libraries remain relevant. They were in the past, they are today, and they will be in the future. It's a place where we are responsive to your needs, to patron needs, and so we will survey. And we actually survey twice a year to determine what changing needs people have for the library, and then we seek to answer those. But in terms of the information we have here, everyone knows they're curated. This is the best information, the most current information, and it's available for free as a card-carrying member of the library.
You're watching City View TV, your Richland community connection.